Welcome back to the Agile Coffee Podcast's Espresso Shots, where you can get a taste from a classic brew, something from our archives, right? My name's Vic Bonacci. I'm the host of the Agile Coffee Podcast. You can find all of our podcasts if you go to the website agilecoffee.com/podcast. The whole entire catalog is there. So I'm going to spin the wheel. We've only got 2 topics left. So this is episode 13. So which of these 2 topics is it going to be? From episode 20 or episode 46? Well, let's find out. I don't have to spin the wheel next time. This is the last spin for a while. Okay, so it landed on red, which is pointing to episode 46. So as I pull this off, we've got 74 episodes of the podcast available. So 46 is still kind of in the older days for me, right? In fact, 46 comes from April 2016. This came from right after a training from the back of the room. I went to a class or a training that taught training from the back of the room. And so we did a lean coffee after that event, and Lonnie Weaver-Johnson asked the question related to training from the back of the room and self-organization. So how is TBR, and particular that training that we went to, it's kind of a meta question, how is TBR enabling or similar to self-organizing, like the self-organizing teams that we might have when we work in an Agile environment? So if you're using Scrum, for example, we encourage our teams to be self-organizing, right? So Lonnie asked, isn't it fun, and what examples might we see where we as TBR enthusiasts and practitioners are moving just natively, just without any real direction toward the idea of self-organizing teams? Does the trainer need to do the thing that they teach? Was also in there. I'm not sure if we get to that in this clip, but I wanted to put it just in case we covered it. So training from the back of the room, for those who don't know, was put together by, I got my name tag on here still. I have a second book. Put together by Sharon Bowman. And it's been popular with people in the Agile world because not only if you're going to teach something, but just in general terms, if you're working with teams and you're encouraging this adult learning from your team so that they can constantly be learning, what are some methods that you can use? What are some activities that you can use? And how do you kind of tactically introduce those activities in the case of your Scrum team, for example? Maybe at a retrospective or a planning session, you might include some of these different ways of learning so that people retain it more. It was a really wonderful time in my life because I traveled to Orlando, Florida for this training. I met a number of fantastic people, which you're going to hear on this podcast episode. I'll read off some of their names. You have Abid, Lonnie, Tomas, Mario, Fred, Stuart, David, and Anderson. Wow, it was a full table. And the episode itself was really superb. So if you're especially if you're interested in some of these TBR concepts, I've had a few podcasts on them, but if you go to agilecoffee.com/episode 46, you'll hear the whole rundown with all of our participants. So I'm going to turn it over now to the group. We're going to hear from them. And then I'd like to ask you also to contribute your own questions, your own comments and perspectives. Use the comments below here and let us know what you think. Become a part of our conversation. Training from the back of the room related to self-organization. Lonnie, why'd you put that on there?
I just thought that was such an interesting correlation today as I was listening and participating in the learning. It just made me feel kind of warm inside because self-organization is such an important thing to all of us Agilists, and to experience a training class that was really focused around self-organization, it was just kind of a heartwarming experience has to go through. And it makes me believe even more I need to make some changes to my material to even make it more of a self-organized experience for my learners.
What I feel about like TBR is something like that is a good environment to like promote like self-organization, like because you have to say to people, okay, now you need to do that, or now this is the subject. Can you just explain to your colleagues what you need, what you know? But the difference between like is that like provide some tools and some ways and some mindset that help that. I feel exactly this about self-organization, TBR.
It called my attention how we actually followed an agenda through the day. We covered all of the topics that were in the agenda. However, we never felt it was rigid, and you learn that by reading the book, but seeing it in action, I think it was very powerful. And of course, that is something that in our Scrum and trainings, we need to make sure that we keep it that way so that students can actually get the most out of the topics without worrying about what's next and how many time do we have left, to call the day.
Yeah, it reminded me of learning to ride a bicycle. Your parents holding it and you're riding, you're trying it, and then suddenly you turn around, they're not holding it anymore. Hey, look, you're already doing it.
Yeah.
Surprise, you already learned it, and then we move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
It's very fast. It's very. The cadence was very quick. It's good.
Yeah, that was fast, and it reminded me of Pink's, intrinsic motivation that we had a certain amount of autonomy over what we were doing, and we understood why, because we're here, because we want to learn. But I think the levels of motivation were very high, and that's what I took away as well. If I can bring that to my trainings or my coaching, then that's really cool. There's it's kind of like student-led learning, but there's still the really nice thing, as Thomas said, we still got through the agenda. We met the goals of the trainer as well, which is good.
And I think the opportunity to self-organize helped us build a bond at our table. Mm-hmm. I know more than one table felt it, but when she said stand up, and I had the feeling we were all separating, I was like, no, I like my people. And we'd only been together a few hours, so it was amazing how working together caused us to feel a sense of team.
And we had fun. We had fun doing things, so it was great.
Yeah, very safe places. She was talking about kind of a spectrum of low risk to high risk, and the lowest risk is just pair sharing, she called it, and then the next step up is sharing with your table because you've established that bond with people, and then a higher risk follows from that. So we had 6 tables here today with about 5 or 6 people per, so 32 people or so. I think it was a really good class size. I wanted to hear if anyone had anything to say about their specific table, if they had any examples of self-organizing with any of the tools that we used today. The one I thought of right off the bat was toward the end of the day when we had to kind of come up with one of the trumps and one of the tools, and we had to kind of self-organize on what the content is.
So this is sort of a watershed moment for me to see such a large group go through training. I used to be a teacher, a high school teacher, and one of the things that I struggled with was teaching large groups and trying to get feedback and ensure that the entire group is learning. And I always preferred smaller groups, smaller classes. Seeing this format, though, I can see, one, I think people are having a lot more fun in a larger group, and that can only be good for people's learning. The second thing I can see with the larger groups and breaking it out into these different teams is that people can see what other people are learning. And so it's just compounding your own learning. You're able to compare what you've done with what other people have done, and you're not just learning what you've done, but there's so many more lessons you're learning as a result. So I'm a believer now in large groups. Really, I still have to struggle with sort of the feedback and assessment and that sort of thing. But I could definitely see some value in the larger groups and the teams.
One funny thing that happened on my table was that we all are a bunch of introverts, and yet it was very, very, very easily and quickly we all were sharing our knowledge and our ideas. And that's one of the things that this safe environment creates.
Yeah.
One thing that was really interesting on my group, something like that, like we are thinking about a specific subject to provide, like in the TBR, way. And then what's happened, something like that, my colleagues start to discuss about the subject, and they choose like baseball. I'm Brazilian, I don't know anything about baseball, only about soccer. And I pick the flip chart, and I start to draw things, and probably they don't know that I know the techniques about drawing. It's okay. And they just start to, okay, now we talk about that, and I start to draw things, and then they start to self-organize like the questions, and then after that we start to self-organize other things, and then we self-organize like the presentation. Like no one like was the leader of anything. We just self-organize everything. It was really good environment. Just do what I feel about it.
Yeah, the team did it, which was great.